And I don't know if you know the school that I just talked about, Jenner, it was torn down and they rebuilt a brand new Jenner school, beautiful Jenner School of the Arts, I believe it is. And in the course of their deciding whether to close the schools, this particular school that's totally underutilized, like many of the ones that they're talking about closing, they're keeping open. But it is a beautiful, beautiful building. One of the other things you were talking about community before. Right in that neighborhood, there were several churches, and when I think about that community, you know, there being a community, you know, there was the school, there was this Lutheran church, and then there was another one called Wayman AME Church, one of the old, really old, traditional African American churches that's in that neighborhood. It is still there. It's almost like a little island, you know, in and of itself. And you can see the same thing if you go over to State Street, between 51st and 55th Street, and you look west, you can see this church, and I can't remember the name of it. Do you remember the name of it?
St. Mary's.
St. Mary's, that sits right there, and that was rooted in the community. So the same thing was with this community, Wayman AME, the Lutheran Church, and then over east, just 2 blocks, St. Joseph Parish. And if you take the Brown Line train, you know, to the north side, you will pass St. Joseph Church, and the train goes around the church because they didn't want to tear that church down, because it's rooted in the community. So they literally cut corners to go around that church and to put that green line, of the brown line in, which they put in 1907, but that church was there and they went around the church. And that just shows you, it shows you that yes, even though I was not of that community, there was a community there, you know, and it's a pretty important thing to think about.
Since you said that area is now kind of taking a 180, would you ever be willing to move back to that area?
I think, yeah, I would. I would think about moving over there. I think it's probably priced more than I can afford at this point. You know, even though they've said that they've got mixed income housing, it doesn't look cheap, let's put it that way. I mean, anytime you can go to Dominic's and buy sushi and, you know, all these fancy things, you know, they didn't have no sushi when I was down there, you know. It was, yeah, I would consider it, but I think it's a little more money than I could afford to right now, especially since I'm thinking of retiring sometime within the next couple of years. So it would be pretty expensive. I'm going to stay put where I am now.
Could you go back and name the places that your family moved to after the migration?
I guess you could say my parents were part of the migration. My mom is from Kentucky. My father's family is from Georgia. So they came here in the 1940s. And originally we lived at 40th and Cottage Grove. My father's gas station was at 40th and Cottage Grove. Right across the street, just south of that gas station, was the Rayner Funeral Home. And we lived in a building right next to the Rayner Funeral Home and up some stairs. So that's where we originally lived. After that, my father sent us, the wife and the kids, we bought a farm in Michigan, so he sent us, and we lived on a farm in Michigan for 5 years. And after that, we moved to Chatham, 78th and Prairie. 78th and Prairie, right across the street from Ruggles School, which is the school I went to. And then we moved to Cabrini-Green. And that was in 64 to 66. But most of the time, like maybe from when I was 7 years old until I was 14, I lived in Chatham.
Do you think that because you moved so often, that's kind of the reason that you try to keep to yourself a lot and that you're very focused on school?
I don't think we didn't move as much as most people. You know, that's pretty stable to live in one house for, like in Michigan, we lived there 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then when we moved to Chicago, we lived there from maybe 19, oh gosh, how old was I? Maybe 7 years old. So I was 7 years old. So 7 years in that house. That wasn't very long. I mean, that was a long time to live in a house. Yeah, I don't think we moved that much by comparison to other people.
What do you mean comparison to other people? Like, were there people that would move like every 2 years? Or?
There is a lot of families that move every 2 years, and what are the reasons for it? People move, and think about what we're going through today. Mm-hmm. The politics of the things that you've been hearing about, the sequester and, all that stuff that's going on, that's affecting people because right now they have a lot of people that have Section 8 vouchers. So they can take their voucher and go to a neighborhood and live in a pretty nice neighborhood because the government is paying money to subsidize their rent. So the sequester that just happened in March 1st or whatever it was, is affecting these people getting these vouchers for Section 8. So you don't know what's going to happen now, but let's say that there's this family that's living in Albany Park right now on Section 8 voucher, and they lose that voucher. Their rent is like $800, and they lose that. Where are they going to have to move? Where are they going to have to move?
Somewhere cheaper.
Somewhere cheaper. And somewhere cheaper is located where?
Back in the city, or,
well,
not necessarily.
In the worst neighborhood, right? So what's that going to do for them as far as being safe, being in a safe neighborhood, being in a stable neighborhood, being in a neighborhood that has good schools? Like, I live in Albany Park. The schools around me are pretty decent. None of them are closing, by the way. But if this family that lives over there has that voucher, the voucher's taken away from them, they're going to have to move maybe to Austin, or maybe they're going to have to move to Garfield Park, someplace like that, or someplace like that. That's going to change their life. Kids are going to have to go to a different school. Probably that school might not be as good. So it's a problem.
Well, public housing was built for people who couldn't afford nicer houses or bigger houses. What do you think led to sort of the downfall of public housing and why it didn't succeed?
The downfall of public housing was the fact that it shouldn't have been done that way anyway. That's the truth of it. It was a mistake. They should have thought of a different way. Like I described the different kind of housing that was adjacent to Cabrini-Green, the low-rise buildings, the kind of townhouse places. Those seem to be okay. But whenever you have all these people in one building, vertical, that's a problem. And all of those buildings along State Street from 35th Street to 51st Street, there was like, I don't know how many buildings, but building after building after building after building. Robert Taylor Homes, Stateway Gardens, all those apartments, all those people, all in those buildings. You know, that's not a good thing. Think about it. So yeah, that's what the problem was. It was a mistake. They shouldn't have done it that way. They should have found something different. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah,
Absolutely. Do you guys have any other questions? Is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
Probably. I mean, sure. What do you want to know? I can share a lot of different things. You know, when you get to be my age, you can go on and on and on about stuff, you know? I can talk about a ton of things, anything related to Chicago history, you know, whatever you want to know.
Is there anything very specific that comes to mind that you think we should know, that we maybe are missing?
You mean about public housing and that
Yes.
sort of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Not really. I can't think of anything really, no. And I feel like, to be perfectly honest, I didn't live there very long. It made a big impression on me in a negative way, but it didn't affect me in a negative way. I'm still the same person. I probably got character out of it because you learn how to persevere. You learn how to survive. You think about people trying to survive, and I was one of the lucky ones. I had stuff to do and places to go. Imagine if you were on welfare living there. Imagine what that would be like. We weren't on welfare. We just lived there because it was cheap. Well, my father got his act together. So.
What was your perception of public housing before you moved there? So when your parents told you you'd be moving to public housing, did you know anything about it? Did you know what you were getting into?
Heck yeah. Yeah, you know what it's like. I mean, all you have to do is look at those places and you can see that it's not a good environment, I was dreading it. I was totally dreading it. But it was a means to an end. We were told, if you can sacrifice these 2 years, we're going to have a better life. Because we came from a better life. Imagine the people that they didn't have any, a better life before and who lived there. Imagine what their life was like. Yeah.
With going to school, we've learned a lot about in our class about the stereotypes of public housing, and you mentioned, you were a family that wasn't on welfare when you lived in there. Were you ever stereotyped at school? Did you let people know you lived in public housing facility?
That's a really very interesting question because I probably did tell people, where I lived. I mean, I can't think of a reason that I would have said, oh my God, we just moved to Cabrini-Green, I can't imagine that I did that, but, I probably told people, well, yeah, we live at 502 West Oak. How many people at Senn High School knew that, what was at 502 West Oak?